We recognize that many people with disabilities have representative payees that are appointed by the Social Security Administration after a review of their experience with using money and with in providing supports to make sure that money is used well. A representative payee is someone who is appointed again by the Social Security Administration when they determine that someone is unable to effectively manage their own money. It's appointed, and their role is to help people to manage that Social Security income, disability income, so that it is used for their purpose. So really the intent of the Social Security Administration doing this is really wants to protect people's money and make sure that all of the money is used for the person. The struggle that we have is that many people with disabilities have had little to no experience with managing their money. They haven't been responsible for paying their own bills. They haven't been responsible for developing a budget, and maybe not even for saving money. So, and they haven't had the opportunity to learn from what they do well or from any mistakes that they make. And so when they're appointed a rep payee, that person then frequently takes on this responsibility and keeps them from having experience with their money, keeps them from being responsible for developing their budget, paying bills, and or saving money, and it takes away that opportunity to learn from success or mistakes. So we know in everything that we do that money is equal to power, that money is very important to people. And so we're looking at what can we do to make sure that people gain experience with their money, that they have the opportunities to manage their money, to budget their money, and to learn both from their successes and from their mistakes. And we do that through thinking about, in terms of the personal outcome measures, what CQL has called the 3 E's: education, experience, and exposure. So people need to learn about what's going on with their money, what the rep payee does, what their responsibilities are, what they can do, and then we need to provide them some experience and the opportunities that they need in order to participate in the management of their money. So we've invited people to come and talk to you, people that are actually providing supports to people, so they can share how they do these things with you. But first, let's just think about where does this come up in the personal outcome measures. And when we talk about the outcome, people exercise rights, generally speaking, we talk about money. And what we find is that people maybe manage part of their money, they get a certain amount, or they have access to their money, but they don't have access to all of their money. And so this is just a challenge for us to think about, making sure that people are educated about their right to have access to all of their personal possessions, including money, and that if that right is identified as important to them, that they get the training and support in order to exercise that right, and that any rights limitations are looked at under treated fairly. So CQL for many years has looked at the issue of rep payee under treated fairly. So when someone is appointed a rep payee, it limits their right to have access to their money and to manage their money in a way that works for them. So we ask that if there's that limitation in place, that organizations recognize that and that they provide due process. So Kate?
Hello, everyone. Let's do a quick poll. So if everybody who is on a computer, could look at the poll that just showed, having a rep payee is always necessary, may limit rights, not part of our role in supporting people. So let's wait just a second, or a minute, sorry, not a second.
And Kate, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you that in this particular question, you can answer any, or you can answer more than one. So you might say that it limits rights, but it's always necessary. You may say that it's always necessary, but it's not part of our role.
Okay, we have closed the polling. Kathy, you want to share results? So it looks like 15% of people say that having a rep payee is always necessary. 99% of people say that having a rep payee may limit rights. And 8% of people say that it's not part of their role in supporting people. So Kathy, if you could advance the slide. So let's talk for a minute about the due process when it comes to representative payee. So having a representative payee is a rights limitation and should be viewed as such. The reason for that is because when a person has a representative payee, that rep payee is responsible for that person's funds, and the person may not be able to access those funds to spend in a way that he or she wants to spend them. So we do look at it as a rights limitation. The other reason we look at it as a rights limitation is because what we have seen during POM conversations and during accreditation visits is that people haven't really been given a true choice when it comes to having a rep payee. So that's the other reason that we look at it as a rights limitation. So how do we make sure that this limitation is really necessary? Of course, we start with presuming competence, and then we impose financial restrictions only when a person's been assessed and that they have a need for financial assistance or for a representative payee. We want to make sure that there's a plan to promote financial literacy, and that can look like various things, to different people, and it could be anything from teaching someone how to use a debit card to teaching someone to bank, or it could be a variety of things, whatever the support the person needs. We also want to ensure that less restrictive interventions have been attempted. So, and that's right in alignment with the HCBS new settings rule for those of you in the United States who are listening to this. And then we also must have a plan in place for people to regain that right. And we don't want to expect perfection. When we assess someone, it should be an assessment that is based on strength and then identifies the support that the person needs to ensure that they're managing funds in an appropriate way. Next slide, please. So let's talk for a minute about adequate due process. On page 29 of your POM manual, we give some direction around adequate due process. And the first thing we want to chat about is that the restriction is actually based on need, that the person needs the restriction, that it's not for staff convenience or because a parent said so or because the agency thinks it's the best thing for the person. It actually has to be based on need. The person also has to be informed of any options that they may have, and then the outcomes and risks of that restriction. The person also should give informed consent, which means they have to know the options and the risks. Less restrictive interventions, again, have been tried. Sometimes we see agencies miss that restrictions are only temporary, and there should be a plan in place to restore the right, and that restriction should be eventually eliminated, which also reduces the reliance on the restriction. Agencies should also, to ensure adequate due process, they should demonstrate that the restriction will cause no harm and that the person has had a fair and impartial hearing. Next slide, please. So typically a fair and impartial hearing is accomplished by inviting the person to a Human Rights Committee meeting. And some of the parameters that we recommend to agencies is that 1/3 of the committee should not be affiliated with the organization. So by affiliated, we mean that they don't work for the agency, or they're not connected to the agency in any form. So 1/3 of that committee should not be affiliated. And then a person supported or people supported should be active members of that committee. Now, of course, they would be considered affiliated with that committee or with the agency. And then we really want at least one person with prior experience with rights. Sometimes that could be an attorney, it could be an advocate, you know, just someone that has experience with supporting people and their rights. Next slide, please. So some other things that we want you to look at are the additional considerations that are on page 34 of your POM manual. We want to ensure that the type and extent of due process depends on which right is to be limited or restricted. And the greater the impact on the person's life, the greater the requirement for review and protection. So in this conversation, we want to talk about since we're talking about money, if money is very, very important to someone, then that due process should be extensive. It shouldn't just be, you know, something that's kind of given to the committee and without the person being present or things like that. So the greater the impact, the greater the requirement for review and protection. So on a side note, some rights limitations, such as guardianship or commitment to a facility, are put in place through the legal system. We do expect the organization to regularly review that restriction, even if it has been through the court system. So we can implement strategies to reduce the reliance on that restriction. Next slide, please. So let's do another quick poll. Oops. So this is a true or false question. So once someone has a rep payee, they will always have a rep payee, or people can request to change their rep payee. Okay, so the polling has closed, and 106% of people have answered false. So once someone has a rep payee, they will always have a rep payee. I'm not sure how 106% is possible, but it is what it is. And then 100% or 106% of people stated that people can change their rep payee. And no one said the opposite of those. So next slide, please, Kathy. So you are correct. And people can change the rep payee, and it's not a forever sentence. So the Social Security does allow you to change your rep payee, and at any time you can request that they change or terminate the payee arrangement. So supporting people to change the rep payee if they're not satisfied with the rep payee, or to eliminate the need for a rep payee, is something that agencies could support people to do. There is lots of information on the Social Security website regarding rep payee. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the systems that Social Security has put in place, but there is some good information on there. So Kathy, next slide.
So hi everybody, this is Pepe Diaz Salazar. I'm happy to be here. And so we at the ARC of Putnam are still at the very beginning process of looking at rep payeeship and looking at how we can support people, because certainly we have discovered through our long partnership with CQL that most of the people that we support here don't really have the education or the understanding of what rep payee means, or the process, or even the responsibilities to be able to take it on. You can go to the next slide. So some of the things that we've been looking at is, you know, and Kate and I think Kathy both started with this, is that, you know, we have to start by presuming that everyone's competent, and then to do an assessment in partnership with each individual to determine not only their need but also their interest, because in having conversations with people and trying to like sort of help them sort of understand what rep payee is and, you know, where their money comes from, you know, many people just have said to me, you know, well, Peppy, I don't really care. You know, I just want to make sure I, you know, have my, you know, my spending money for, you know, every week, or, you know, that my vacation is taken care of, or, you know, like, so, you know, there, a lot of the people that we're working with right now, but I think a lot of this, maybe their lack of interest could also, we have to think, can also be susceptible to the fact that the 3 E's are not fully present. You know, they really need more education and experience and time to sort of explore the whole idea of what it means to be their own rep payee. So then if the assessment determines a need for rep payee, or maybe the assessment determines that we need to do a change in status, like to remove rep payeeship, then we need to be able to support the person to, like, you know, make an informed choice about, well, if you need a rep payee, who do you want that person or entity to be, you know, and then help them and support them to make that necessary change in whatever their current status is. You know, and then all along to provide the education, the oversight protections, you know, to make sure that, you know, that they have what they need in place, and to provide ongoing coaching. You know, there's a program that actually a panelist is going to talk about later on that I discovered from the CQL Facebook group called Sense and Sensibility, and I'm pretty sure, Donna, you're going to talk about that, but we've used that with you know, 3 or 4 people, and it's been really valuable. I mean, it has really helped people to understand more about budgeting, and it's just very hands-on, and it helps people be more independent. We're just at the very beginning stages of this. And then, you know, rep payeeship, you know, should be reevaluated annually, you know, at a minimum. And right now, what we're looking at the ARC of Putnam is trying to figure out, for the people that are interested in looking at rep payeeship or looking at a different arrangement, then looking at putting those supports in place to help them sort of have the skills and the confidence to be able to do it. And until that does happen, that, you know, we're looking at, we would probably be reviewing this in our HRC committee. So you can go to the next slide, please. So there are 2 other things that I just thought of, you know, like I've been thinking about a lot in terms of rep payee status, which is that, you know, it's really important, you know, like what I just outlined before, you know, like presuming competence, doing an assessment in partnership, education, you know, review by the HRC committee. You know, every organization needs to have some sort of uniform process for like talking about and handling representative payee status. But at the same time that we all have that process in place, this is such an individual. I mean, I know everything with, you know, CQL and the POMs, the personal outcome measures, is very individual, but rep payee status, and just the little bit that I've explored it with a couple of people, it is so individual. and you're just not going to know what you need to do until you finish having the conversation with every person that's interested in really like taking control of their financial life. And it's just so individual and unique. And then another point of concern is really just that, you know, like as an agency, we don't really have a lot of ultimate control about who's awarded rep payee status, because that's solely the function of the Social Security office. And our experience with them is that in the past anyway, they've not been very flexible or open to additional considerations. So, you know, again, you know, that's another piece about education, but education of the public and, you know, partners in the public. But, you know, that's another, you know, sort of sticking point in terms of like, you know, in many cases, agencies only have so much control. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Payee. So I had a question, though, I wondered if you could help with. And, you know, you talked a little bit about assessment. Can you talk a little bit about what you do to assess somebody's need for a rep payee or for support with managing their money?
Sure. Well, we do annually. We've I think we've been doing it for 3 years now. It was part of one of our first basic assurance plans with CQL, which was to develop a financial needs assessment. And we do that annually along with a support needs assessment, and those two assessments sort of go hand in hand in terms of really looking at, you know, what is the person's understanding of money, you know, like the basic stuff of like, can a person identify a quarter and a dollar bill and all that stuff. But even if a person can't do that, if they still have a higher understanding of money, because I mean, you know, like someone gives me back change in a grocery store or any place, I don't really look at the change to see if I got the right change. I just dump it in my coin purse. So, you know, like, you know, really looking at not holding people. I think Kate said it, you know, not expecting perfection. And, you know, I don't count my change, so I doubt very many of us count our change. So why should we spend so much time expecting that the people we support to count and be able to count their change? Because frankly, I'm not very good at it myself. And so, you know, like, I really like that the way we've grown in this is that we're not letting that first part of that be a negation for the rest of the assessment, because it really is so much based on what a person's interested in, and then how do we support that person to get to the place where they want to be. Does that help?
I think it does, Payee. Thanks. And I know Donna's going to talk a little bit more about that as well. And but I also wanted to, because there are some people on the call who are not familiar with Social Security Administration in the United States and the rep payee. So I just wanted to go back a little bit and explain that for those people from Canada or other parts of the world where CQL does work, that, you know, although the rep payee may be a term that you're not familiar with, it really is about, you know, you can frame this and take away from this, what kinds of supports do people need in order to be able to be as engaged in managing their money and spending their money and saving their money as they want to be, and to not limit the people just because someone has determined that they aren't capable of managing their benefit money. And so, you know, that's kind of what we were talking about. So I think now we'll go on to Donna's presentation and then come back to the rest of the questions. So, but if you want more information from Payee, here is her contact email address. So now we have Donna, who, as you'll remember, is from the ARC of Onondaga, and she's going to talk a little bit about what their agency has done to support people with Rep Payee.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here. So, like many other agencies, we've kind of struggled with the system-wide rights restriction of Representative Payee. And during our basic assurances, self-assessment, our POM interviews, listening to members of our Participant Advocacy Council, we really needed the right to accessing their money to a greater extent was what people really wanted to have. Our representative payee process has pretty much been kind of a one and done kind of deal. People would come into our residential program and we would offer the service and encourage the service. And once the paperwork was processed, we really never revisited the issue with them. So we knew we had to change that. So we developed a personal finance work group and really started doing some research, looking at what we've currently been doing. Our money management assessment was pretty basic, very just, you know, can they identify coins and dollars and that type of thing. So we really wanted to expand on our assessment as well as start looking at education. If you could go to the next slide, Kathy. So the first part of, can you go to the next slide, Kathy? Oh, never mind. Okay. So we found a publication online that was called, you can go back, sorry, I looked at the wrong one, called Guidance on Money Management for People Who Lack Capacity to Make Decisions About Money. And it was written by this Jane Livingstone and published in the UK, but it's available online. And what we really liked was it had this capability assessment. And the process for the assessment wasn't just a skill-based assessment. It was one in which you made determinations through observations, talking to the person, people who know them well, looking at records, etc. So what we're doing is we took this assessment and we kind of built off of it and we added some pieces of our own. And it's become a three-part assessment. One that breaks down capability areas, and then it goes into skill-based, and then there's a section on determination. You go to the next slide, Kathy. So the first part of our assessment, in the document, they call it vulnerabilities. And it is capabilities as well, but it breaks it down into the 4 areas that you see up on the slide. And the way that the assessment works is that you score each area a 1 through a 5. And if you go to the next slide, I give you an example of what one of the areas would look like for understanding the value of money. So, you know, level 1, the person really has no awareness of values of money, doesn't understand that it's used to buy things, up through 5, where someone really understands the importance and value of money. So our intent here is that each of those 4 areas of vulnerabilities will be assessed, and each will get a level score of a 1 through a 5. And then this gives us kind of an overview, a snapshot of where that person is right now in their capabilities, what we may need to focus on, as well as really helping to determine with the person, what are they even interested in? Are they even interested in learning more about money, having more control over their money? This will really help us get at that. So we added some of our own elements, focusing on, you know, what would that person want? Do they need help with budgeting, etc. If someone scores all 1, most likely that person is going to have some very significant limitations, some significant disabilities. that a focus on money management may not even be in the cards for that person at this time. So that kind of gives us a better sense of, and a documented sense of, you know, that this might not be a road the person wants to go down right now. And giving the scores kind of gives us just a way to kickstart things. You can go to the next slide, Kathy. So the second part of our assessment takes those 4 areas, and then we've added skill assessment. So this is where we will actually do more testing to see what the person actually needs, what level of support the person is at for each of those areas. So I've listed some of the examples of the types of questions under each area, but the assessment, there's quite a few questions for each area to really help us get at, you know, what kind of support the person uses. Abstract money issues is, you know, really so many things: bank services, gift cards. Can they use a computer to help do online banking? Can they download apps on their phone and use something like technology to help them as another support? Next slide, Kathy. So in the last section of our assessment, we do a determination section, and then this will review the sources of income the person has, determines if the person needs and wants a rep payee based on all of the assessments that we've completed. If there's changes that are needed or requested, we would talk about that at that point. And determine if the person is capable with support to manage their money, if there's cash handling limits, what those will be. So it gives us an opportunity. We're planning on doing this assessment on an annual basis. So this will give us an opportunity to review and discuss rep payee status annually. Now, we've only just started rolling this out, so we fully anticipate making some changes as people work with the tool a little bit and give us some feedback. We haven't yet incorporated the HRC review. We're still working that out and trying to figure out a good way to do that without overwhelming that committee too much. But we are pleased at least where we're headed in terms of having a much more in-depth discussion about the person's money and their rep payee status. And you can go to the next slide, Kathy. So as Poppy mentioned in her presentation, education we just felt was really lacking. We've really, done a lot of informal training with individuals, but we really haven't done anything formal. And the work group started looking at, were there classes in the community that people could go to? And, while there is, we didn't feel that it would be tailored to the levels that they might need. So when we went online, we found this curriculum called Sense and Sensibility, which was developed by Pennsylvania Assistive Technology Foundation. And it's really great. It's an online curriculum. You can download all the components, though, which is what we did. And it has 8 different chapters with a lot of different hands-on activities. And, just even starting with identifying wants versus needs, it has an activity to have the person collect receipts and then bring them back to the class and then identify, was this a want, was this a need, how they can put that into a budget. It has activities to do with comparison shopping, helping people find the right deals, identity theft, activities such as that. We're currently not using the assistive technology chapter because it's really focused on Pennsylvania, services that are available in Pennsylvania, but we are hoping to create our own section for people on New York specific information. Next slide, Kathy. So our intent, because classes were supposed to kick off this month, but I don't think they did. Our intent is that we're going to hold the classes over a period of a month and do 2 classes a week for 4 weeks. trying to give people short class time because it's a lot of information for people. Our instructors right now are a house manager who's familiar with day-to-day operations of handling personal finance monies, and then a plan coordinator who does assessments. We're also going to have a member of our finance department, our benefits specialist, will come in during the class to bring the individual's actual benefit information so that they are reviewing their actual stuff in the context of the class. And actually it was great. Our house manager made a contact with one of our local banks. She was there getting some ledgers, and the bank teller, when she heard what we were doing, she offered to come to the classes to help teach the session on banking. So we thought that was a great community connection. And she's offered to give the individuals kind of like the insider's tour of the bank when it's over with, kind of a behind the scenes, so they can ask questions there. So we're looking forward to that. We are planning on keeping our class sizes small, hoping that people will bring the same staff of them who typically works with them. We will be asking individuals and their staff to complete evals for the classes. And then our instructors will be issuing I don't want to call it a report card, but a report on how the individuals did during the class, what they did really well, what they could need some more support with. So we're really hoping that this will help the team have more concrete starting point to really provide some better education, focus their support better, to really help people become, more independent in handling all of their money. You can go to the next slide, Kathy. These are the links for you for the publication as well as the curriculum for Sense and Sensibility. I would love to be able to say how well this is going, but we're just starting it. So it is a work in process, and we're just at the beginning, but we're really excited. We're hoping that we'll really see some growth for people who complete the class. So when we do their financial capability assessment next year, we're really hoping to be able to see that there's been a nice progression. So that's it for me.
Well, thank you very much, Donna. So we have quite a few questions. I think your last slide might have answered many of those. But let me just go back and begin with the beginning of the questions. So one of the questions, and Kate, maybe you can help with this one, and then Donna or Pepe can join in if they want. Can you give some examples of some less restrictive interventions for instead of using a rep payee?
Sure. So if a person, I think a lot of times agencies, it's more convenient to have the agency be the rep payee or to someone be the rep payee, so those Social Security funds that are paying for the person's cost of care go directly to the agency. So you could work with someone who maybe struggles a bit to pay their bills first, to do things like automatic withdrawals or use some online resources to support the person to pay their bills on time, and then to pay those the bills that they have to the agency also. The other answer is really just around providing the supports that the person needs to manage their benefits. And that really starts with the 3 E's. But there are a lot of different ways that an agency could support a person without the person having a representative payee. And the first step is education. So the things that Donna and Pepe were speaking of, are definitely some great starts to support people in their financial literacy. Pepe or Donna, do you have something to add to that?
Thanks, Kate. I think that answers it pretty well. So the next question, and perhaps Donna or Pepe, one of you might have had some experience with this. what if someone has a rights restriction, they have a rep payee, or they have someone that manages or controls their money, and then that restriction is, they have education experience and exposure, the restriction is reduced, and they resort back to those undesired behaviors of not paying their money or paying their bills. What happens then? Do they go back to having a rep payee?
Honestly, this is Donna. We haven't gotten there yet, to be honest with you, where we've had that we've done this process to the point where we were rep payee and then we're no longer rep payee for the person. We're just starting this out. But to answer that question, just in hypothetical, if someone had a restriction in place, I don't think that one mistake would cause you to automatically return the restriction. There is a natural consequence to not paying your bills. I mean, if I don't pay my cable bill and they turn my cable off, well, that is what happens. But if you're rep payee, you do have the responsibility to ensure that that their money is being managed in a fiscally responsible manner. But that doesn't mean that the person can't make mistakes. But I think if you made mistakes and you provide education and then the mistakes continue, as rep payee, you're duty bound to then put additional restrictions or supports in place so that that person is then being re-educated and can learn again. That's just my opinion.
Thanks, Donna. And I think, even if the restriction was eliminated and so they no longer had a rep payee, I think the answer still applies, Donna, in that, you look at what are those other things that you can do to support the person. You certainly wouldn't want anyone to become homeless or not to get needed medications. And so what are those supports that you put in place? And there may be some more temporary limitations that the person could agree to without having a rep payee that's formally appointed by Social Security Administration. So there may be some more training. And so it's a person by person basis. And you'd look at what were the factors that perhaps led them to not being able to pay their bill. Was it that someone, they were using their money for other things? What was going on? So you'd have to kind of really look at the individual assessment. It is possible that, and I'm sure that it has happened more than once, where someone has had a rep payee, they petitioned for not having a rep payee, they are granted that, and then they don't pay their bills, and Social Security, if they become aware of that, may indeed put a rep payee status in place. An agency we'll talk about ultimate authority because that's one of the other questions. The agency doesn't have the authority to institute a rep payee. They may decide that based on the person's behavior that they need to have Social Security reassess them. But again, the agency wouldn't be responsible for the rep payee, that would be Social Security. So the agency, like Donna said, would be looking at what other things can they do. Peppy or Kate, do you have anything to add?
No, you did a great job.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Donna. What was the tool Peppy referred to, which she found useful in its hands-on approach to money management and budgeting?
Oh, well, I could share it with you and maybe you could share it with everyone else. We've adapted it quite a bit from, I don't even remember where the original source was that we got it from, but I'd be happy to share it with you, Kathy, and maybe you can find a way to share it out. Or people could email me.
Well, and to avoid that happening, if you wanted to share it with me, we can send it out as a handout with the webinar.
Oh, okay, so I'll send it to you.
Perfect, perfect. So then we have another question. How can an agency be awarded this ultimate control? Is there a forum or a meeting that can take place in this situation as well, similar to a meeting to determine risk of having one? So of having a rep payee. So I guess that I can talk about that, and that's similar to what we were just talking about, Donna and I, in the conversation about the question about if someone doesn't pay their bills. So the agency cannot be awarded this ultimate control. It either would, that the ability to assign a rep payee is from Social Security. The agency's responsibility would not be to control, but to support the person in managing their money. So yes, there would be a meeting that you could have that would help determine the risk and vulnerabilities, and then identify those supports that need to be put into place. All right. Pepe's already offered to share her financial needs assessment. We'll send that out. Please repeat the resource that Donna mentioned. So Donna, would you just talk about the two resources that you used? Let me just go back to that slide maybe. So these are the resources that Donna shared. So there's guidance on money management, there's Sense and Sensibility. So you'll get this when we send this out. I'll leave it up for a little while. I think then that also answers the question about the citation for the resource. And someone is wondering, Donna, if you would be able to share the assessment that you've modified.
Absolutely. I can do the same thing. I can send it to you, and then you can include it as a handout with the webinar link. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
So then there's a question. In New York State, OPWDD, which is the Office for Persons with Developmental Disabilities, require rep payee be assumed by the agency for people seeking residential admission. Pepe or Donna, Kate, do you know the answer to that question?
I do. It doesn't. OPWDD doesn't require that we assume it, but they require that it's offered by the agency. So under New York State regulations, we have to offer the service, but the person does not have to take it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that answer. So then we have a question, where's the education class being held? And that would be held at that agency, and it would be open, Donna, right, just to people you support. Is that correct?
Correct. That's what we're doing right now. Yes.
So, and you base that on the Sense and Sensibility?
Yep. That's the curriculum that we're going to be using. And we're hoping to keep the classes to maybe like an hour, because we just think that we'll lose people if you go on too long.
Okay, yeah, good point, thank you. Can a provider not agree to provide services for an individual if they are not the rep payee? Kate, do you know the answer to that question?
I would hope the answer is no. But I don't know why a provider wouldn't, well, I guess I can figure out some reasons why a provider would insist on being the rep payee, but it doesn't, I mean, there's nothing in the Social Security Act that says that the provider has to be a rep payee and can, not serve someone because they're not the rep payee.
Right, and CQL would look at that if we went in to do an accreditation, or if we were using the personal outcome measures, we would look at that as a a blanket restriction if you required your organization to be the rep payee. And so that we would probably make some recommendations around that. So do you have any resources geared towards helping financial departments really understand the concepts of person-centered services? We have struggled with conflicting ideologies of receipt collection and spending habits of people supported.
That's a great question, Jill. And having personally had to deal with that situation, I think one of the best things that you could do is involve the finance staff when you're doing a self-assessment of the basic assurances. That's one way to do it. But involve them on the rights instead of just the finance part. But really teaching your finance staff about rights is a way to hopefully help them see that, gathering every receipt for every penny for a person is probably an annoyance to some people. And then oftentimes agencies, if they're rep payee, for their Social Security funds, that does not mean that the agency manages the rest of the person's funds. So, and that would be gifts, earned income, found income, inherited income. Rep payee only gives the person financial oversight of those Social Security funds, not any other funds. And that is very clear on the Social Security website. So that may help finances or the financial office understand, the limitations around being a rep payee. But really I would start with, engaging that finance office around training them about rights. Does that help?
I think that's a great answer, Jill and Kate. Peppy or Donna, would you add anything?
This is Peppy. I would just add, we certainly have had these conversations here, and having just breaking it down to well, what are the options for you in your life? Do you have to wait 7 days for a check to go buy a new TV set? If your TV set breaks tonight, would you wait 7 days? I mean, if you had the money in the bank, would you wait 7 days to get the check cut? And everybody looks at me like I'm a lunatic. Of course they wouldn't. Well, guess what? Well, why should then the people that we support have to wait those 7 days? And or also just bringing up, which we've just recently in the past year or so gotten through this, which is, welcome to the 21st century and ordering online with a credit card. The fact that we were trying to order things from Amazon using a check, hello, please. And so, we found new ways by just asking those really practical questions and getting people to see. And then the finance department staff have been great in saying, oh, yeah, I get it. Well, there probably is another way. And we found other ways to do things, whereas, 5 years ago, it would have been no way, no how.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing is that I can't tell you how many agencies I've been to that are supporting people in their finances by helping them write checks. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm not sure. I can tell you that I don't write very many checks anymore. So, why aren't we teaching people to use debit cards or, right. Obviously based upon what the person wants to learn how to do. Some people do prefer to still write checks, and that's great, keep writing checks. But for the most part, people are using credit cards, which adds another layer to that abstraction, right. Which is another, could be a barrier for some people that you'll just have to provide some support around.
Okay, great. Okay.
I just wanted to. I just wanted to add to that, just when we started our discussions and the changes, we pulled our finance department in right from the get-go. And they did have some concerns, and some very legitimate concerns, on just how to manage, you know, their representative payee duties without, you know, being negligent of their rep payee duties. And so we had to have a lot of conversations, like Poppy said, about some of the practicalities. And they participated in the development of the assessment. They added quite a bit to the abstract concepts, so that we were having those included in the assessment. So it was helpful. But they're still a little nervous about the direction, which I understand, because we don't want to get in a situation where, you know, we have surveyors come in and say, oh, now you're, you know, not financially, you know, monitoring for what you need to. But I think we're headed in the right direction.
Great, thank you. We're a little over time. I'm going to go ahead. We just have a couple of other questions, and I think we can answer them. But one of the things that I would just add to that one, though, is that be sure you share your success stories, not just your horror stories, with the people in the business office. Those success stories do a lot to showing how you are cognizant of the supports and responsive to people's needs, and people can learn and change. Okay, so there's another question. I just want to make sure, Donna, what's the money management website that was created in Pennsylvania?
That's the Sense and Sensibility one that's up on the screen.
Thank you. Okay. Do you have any norm reference data that shows the financial literacy of average adults? We do not. That's probably available somewhere, but we do not have that. I suspect that some of the consumer credit agencies would have some of that information. Maybe I missed this, but what about self-directed services? Some agencies state that they must be the rep payee in order for a person to receive services. So what we find, I'll go ahead and answer, and you guys can jump in if you want. What we find is that there are sometimes understandings in different states, sometimes misunderstandings where these things are said. So I always go back to the source, and so I would check with the state agency. There are variances in the Rep Payee program is a federal program. You know, so it's Social Security is federal, but in each state, services and requirements are defined by the state agencies. So I'd always go back and check to see if the information is right. And I'll go back to the question in New York about, do agencies have to be the rep payee? And when CQL first started doing a lot of work in New York, we were told absolutely that's the rule. So we went back to OPWDD and they said, no, it's a misunderstanding. So that's what I would suggest that you do, is go back to the source. There's a comment. This person says, my understanding that realeconomicimpact.com is a National Disability Institute effort to enhance financial literacy and status of people with disabilities. And so that might be another resource for you, realeconomicimpact.com. And then, you know, you can find out lots of information about ABLE accounts, but you may look into those as well. Someone asked, we still use checks. Are we allowed to get debit cards for all of the people? CQL is not the rule maker, so we would certainly say that if it makes sense for the person to have debit cards, it might make sense for you to help them get them. But as far as I know, there are no limitations on people having debit cards unless it's something, is anybody aware of that? Any limitations?
There in New York, they're not, this is Pepe, there are not any limitations. In fact, we're looking right now into that very prospect of getting debit cards for all the individuals who we support residentially. And it's, I don't know the name of the company, but the debit card is called PEX, P-E-X. You could probably Google it and get more information about it.
Okay, great, thank you. And then there's a question, so Pepe and Donna, maybe you could help, and Kate, if you've had any experience with this. Do any of the people that you support who have a developmental disability have credit cards? And do they qualify for credit cards if they only have Social Security as an income?
We do have people who have credit cards. I'm thinking of a couple of people that I know of, but they also work. So I'm not sure about the Social Security thing, but I would think that that would not be, I know that we've worked with people to develop a credit history so that then they would qualify to be able to get a credit card.
Right, I find it's more about paying bills and having records that you've had a utility, you know, you've paid your utility bills than it is about income. But that would be up to the credit card company. So there's a person who says in Illinois, they have a 360 access card and a certain amount of money can be put on the card and you don't have to worry about someone emptying their accounts. There are some supports available. Thank you for sharing that. There are supports available through banks where you can minimize, you can put some criteria around how much people can spend, how many debits they can make in a day, how many debits they can make in a certain place. Again, we would look at all of those things as an individual, as a restriction, and need to look at it on an individual basis. Okay. When I worked as an MSD, which is a Medicaid Services Coordinator, most likely in the state of New York, there was somebody on her caseload who had a credit through Finger Hut, and their only source of income was Social Security. Okay. So I don't have any other questions on my queue unless I missed something. And if I did, please feel free to sending an email. You can reach, you can reach me. I'll show you the slide in a minute. I really want to take some time and thank Pepe and Donna for their partnership with CQL in helping us provide this information to you. Thank you very much, and thank you all for attending. If you have questions, Kate and Catherine and I are both available by email, or these are our phone numbers. And if I missed any questions, be sure and send them to me and I will follow up. Thank you all very, very much for your participation. We appreciate you all very much. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.